Hello everybody, this is Oliver from Nia and today we are going to talk about caffeine in green tea, and I want to show you how you can regulate from your side the green tea caffeine level and what finally influences the green tea. Good. So for this example, what I brought with me is Gyokuro green tea. So Gyokuro green tea is a long shaded green tea, and this green tea has, for the Japanese, the highest amount of caffeine of all the loose leaf tea. You also have matcha. Matcha is a powdered green tea, mostly also coming from or being very close to the Gyokuro. So these two teas are very close to each other in terms of amount of caffeine. And this is coming from the shading of the green tea. So the green tea itself is shaded between 20 and 25 days depending on the farmer in the last stage just before the harvest, and this finally gives the tea the strength and the high amount of caffeine which it carries. And why does the shaded tea especially carry caffeinated or is much more caffeinated than regular green tea? And this is coming due to the fact that by covering the tea and by cutting out the sunlight, the plant does get stressed. She starts to absorb a lot of minerals from the earth or from the soil, and also to protect it better, it starts to produce a lot of caffeine, as caffeine is keeping away the bugs and then lets the plant survive. So this is the main reason why the caffeine is higher in green tea, which is coming from a shaded process. So now I want to go a little bit into how we can extract and how is the caffeine extracted. So when we compare the caffeine of green tea and especially of Gyokuro, we talk here about a double shot of espresso. So the caffeine content is rather high, and just like this in a pure form, it would have a very big effect on your body. But what happens actually in the extraction is that also with the water you will not be able to extract all the content of caffeine of the leaf. For example, when we brew this tea now here at 100 degree, which we will not do, but with 100 degree you're able to extract the maximum amount of caffeine. There you are after 2 minutes around 72 or 74% of all the caffeine. So around 3/4 you're able to extract. When we go over a lot of amount of steeping, so for example the Professor Young, he has done a study about the caffeine content in green tea, and there they went over 10 steepings of each time 0.5 minutes, and after this 10 steepings they achieved even around 90% with 100 degree, and as soon as they went down to 80 degree they only achieved between 80 and 85, and then when they went down to 70 degrees they were able to extract 60% of the tea or the caffeine in the tea. So what you see is that you have, on the one hand you have the length, but the main indicator is actually the temperature, as I said before. So when we talk about lowering the caffeine content, temperature has a very strong influence in all this. So Gyokuro, or what we learn from the farmers, is to brew Gyokuro at a lower temperature. So yes, we are on the level on a double shot of espresso, but finally what we want to do is that we want to bring also the strongest umami taste, the strongest sweetness, and the umami or the sweetness is coming from the L-theanine. This is an amino acid which is in the tea plant or in the tea leaf, and gives it sweet and smooth and round and nearly a little bit thicker texture of the Gyokuro to the tea, and this is very fast extracted into the water. So theanine is actually coming before the caffeine. So the lower we go with the temperature, the sweeter we will also have the tea, because the higher we go, more catechins and also flavonoids, so a little bit more bitter particles of the tea leaf will come into the tea. And now I want to see in this tasting how actually does this affect in terms of the taste to the tea. So I want to dive first into a 55 degrees Celsius green tea. So here we talk, or it is assumed that around 60 degrees we talk about 50 to maybe 60% of all the caffeine which is extracted. In the second part, we go then to 80 degrees, and 80 degrees, Jan said you can get out around 85% of the caffeine. So I really want to dive into that, but I will do 3 steeping and not 10 of a half a minute, but I will do 2 steepings at 2 minutes. So the first steeping at 2 minutes, and then I do 1 to 2 additional steepings. So let's go right into it. For this, I'll take 5 grams of the tea, and I put it into the kyusu. And first one, I have it now at 55 degrees Celsius, so this is around 140 degrees Fahrenheit. And then I'll take the second steeping, and I will go up with this one to 80 degrees and just let it brew, and this for 2 minutes now in the water. Good, so I finished now the steeping of these 2 teas, and what we already can see in terms of colors. So this one here is the 80 degrees, and this one here is the 60 degrees or 55 degrees Celsius water. So here we are around 175 Fahrenheit, 140 Fahrenheit. So you can clearly see that we got much more of a milky and a clearer tone of the tea, while here it seems a little bit more pure, darker, more going into the golden color with the higher degree Celsius. So I'm curious now to see what the difference is. But let's first have a smell maybe of the tea leaves. So this is the same tea for both, same tea leaves. So I have here a lot of sweetness. I got sweet corn, a little bit of a marine salty note, which is coming from the theanine. There's a light grassiness with it, a little bit of an artichoke flavor, and there's a slight roasty flavor as well to it. Let's go with this one here. Here I have much more of a kind of a green, a little bit more of an asparagus flavor. There's a little bit of this kind of sweet corn flavor also in my nose, but it's much less pronounced than the 60 degrees. So just if I come, here I have a lot of sweetness, a lot of sweet corn. Or here I got much more the spinachy artichoke note coming through. So it seems that the grassiness, a little bit more of the grassy tones seem to be in the tea. But let's go in the tasting of these 2 tea. First, 140 Fahrenheit or 55 degrees. I got a very strong kind of sweet flavor, fruity flavor. Then I have the theanine, so a little bit this umami, sweet, savory notes coming in. And it's really nice, dense, gliding over the tongue, bringing this fruitiness. I have a little bit of, there's a lot of this papaya note. I get a lot when I drink like strong green teas with a lot of theanine. So a lot of this umami note. I got a lot of papaya kind of, that the papaya taste for me is very present. Yeah, and a little bit of a creamy, kind of a slight nutty note, a little bit of a cashew note, which I get with it. So very round sweetness, smoothness. Then I get in the lingering and the after lingering aftertaste, I get a lot of, for example, kind of this a little bit marine savory note, but it's very sweet still in its tones. And now let's go into the 80 degrees. Wow, so I got much more of this kind of greeny, veggie. I got a lot of kind of the green peas. I got there's a little bit of a edamame flavor, which is swinging with it. A little spinachy flavor. So you have much more of kind of this sweet fruity tone when you go down with the temperature. So when you have the theanine much more present in the tea, then you definitely get more of this kind of fruity tones, sweet tones, a little bit of a lingering of this kind of a little bit of marine savoriness, which you get with the tea. Meanwhile, with the 80 degrees, it really gets kind of this veggie tone, the spinachy, green peas. You also get a little bit of this salty, kind of a little bit of this marine note, but it's much more kind of the fresh side on the veggie side. So it's a mix of a little bit veggie marine. Here you have fruity marine, so much stronger in the sweetness and the fruitiness of the tea. In the first brewing, I would say here definitely if you're also wanting to play a little bit with the Gyokuro taste around. It's not only in terms of the caffeine, so here we will be able, or we were able to extract around 72% of all the caffeine, while here we're only around 60%. So we have a much lesser or much lower, so around 20% you're able to lower down the caffeine coming from 80 degrees, so 175 Fahrenheit, to 60 degrees or 55 degrees, which is 140 Fahrenheit. So quite interesting. Also for me now, this is the first time I experienced this, where I compared with different temperatures the same Gyokuro. If I want to have a more of the grassy tones, a little bit also a slight bitterness, but it's due to the fact that the Gyokuro has a lot of theanine, has a lot of these sweet particles. It dims down a lot the bitterness. So even with the 80 degrees, I don't have a lot of bitterness, but I have much more the kind of these greener tones mixed a little bit with this savoriness in the end. Meanwhile, with this one here, clearly the fruity and savory tea of these two. But let me finish these two and let's go to the second steeping. So, and again for the second steeping, we see that the higher temperature, so which is this one here, has a much higher, a much denser, a much stronger kind of a golden color, while this one here still stays in the lighter green. But let's go and try the two different teas. Still I have a lot of this edamame taste in my mouth. There's a little bit of this savory greenness, but it stays strong with this green note, which is quite interesting. So kind of a green fresh. It nearly goes a little bit into the sencha section. And now let's have the other one. With the second brewing, we have much more of this nuttiness coming through. There's still this savory, there's still this sweetness, this fruitiness, but it goes a little bit over from a more fruit tone to a little bit more of a nutty tone, which is really interesting. So for me personally, I like a lot this kind of the greener tones, but with the Gyokuro I'm really looking for that I can get extract a little bit this savory and sweeter tones out. So I like to brew it at a low temperature around the 60 degrees. So this one here definitely going from a fruity, then playing in the fruity nutty tone, a little bit of nuttiness in the first, but much more fruity, and then in the second brewing it really gets on the similar level. And here again in the second brewing I have this edamame, these green tones, these more vegetable tones. but also in the second brewing, no real bitterness to it. So the Gyokuro, you can definitely do it at 2 different temperatures. And if I want to extract a little bit less of the caffeine, I definitely go for the 60 degrees, or I get even lower, and there I can get much more of these fruity and sweet tones, a little bit of these nutty tones. If I'm looking to really have my shot of caffeine, which is then around 20 to even 25% higher, then I go for the 80 degrees. And if I want to go even lower, and if you're sensitive to caffeine, the last thing you can actually do is that you do the cold brew. So you just take cold water, 5 grams, you do it for 1 hour, you leave the leaves in the water, you shake it a little bit, and then you take your green tea. And this is only extracting around 20% of all the green tea. So green tea, no matter how sensitive you are to the caffeine, there's always a way you can do it, always a way you can appreciate it. I hope you liked this little session. This is now the comparison of a 80 degree Celsius green tea versus a 60 degrees. Thanks a lot for watching, and see you soon. Bye bye.